Hi, everyone. I'm Ashumi. I'm the founder of Future Plus. We're a growing global network of leaders across industries. And I'm joined today by Pierre-Nicolas, the CEO and co-founder of Arianee, and Francois from Swanstant. We're going to be talking about Arianee's latest white paper discussing the role of tokenization in decoupling growth from new production. So I leave it to you both to also introduce yourselves and what we will be discussing in more detail today.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Francois. I work in sustainability and circular economy. I've been doing that for a long time now. Initially, I did it now with Swanstant, and I'm very excited to be here today to share the work that I've collaborated with Arianee on earlier this year to explore what is the economic opportunity of decoupling for businesses and how can tokenization really accelerate that transformation and make it easier for businesses. Pierre-Nicolas?
Hey, so I'm Pierre-Nicolas, CEO and co-founder at Arianee, and very happy to be with you today to talk about these big challenges and how technology can help overcome them.
Great. So before we get into the actual presentation, I actually just want to make, a point here, because I think decoupling growth is, sometimes looked at in different ways. But I think something to kind of really highlight here is that decoupling growth doesn't necessarily mean declining your profit or having maybe, it's actually the reverse, right? It's decoupling growth actually can lead to increased profitability going into with much more of a long-term view in mind. And it is also really about a change in mindset. So I really want to kind of like delve a little bit deeper into the two key strategies that are outlined in the white paper. One, of course, talking about the products in circulation, and then the other one around the value-added services for new revenue streams. So, Pierre-Nicolas, I leave it to you to share the presentation that you have prepared for us.
Thank you very much. So we'll bounce back and forth with Francois, but first is the context. The context is climate change, the goals of the Paris Agreement, and what it would take to basically meet these goals. We sometimes say that we would need one new COVID per year in the next 5 years to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And it's obviously very hard. It's impossible. And we don't wish to have another COVID and even more one every year. But at the same time, some things need to change. The challenge is, can we succeed in this field without changing the way we operate businesses? We can't afford to meet the Paris criteria at the expense of destroying the economy. It's impossible. So if we want to get there, we have to find a way that allows companies and businesses to continue to grow, that protects tax collection and jobs across the globe.
The core challenge for businesses is once you've gone through efficiencies in your businesses in terms of climate impact, the rest of the work is really hard and often requires a lot of investment. And even if you manage to decarbonize your supply chain, what you realize is if you keep on growing your volumes, you keep on, overreaching your targets from a climate perspective. And so what the scientific community is increasingly telling us, and what we've explored in this report, is the idea that if you manage to decouple the top line of your business from the production of goods, and we're talking about goods industry exclusively here, then you have a clear shot at reaching your climate targets. We as an economy have a clear chance of staying within the 1.5 trajectory. And what we wanted to do with also this report is just explore what are all the strategies that are around decoupling. As you said, Ashumi, sometimes there's a sort of confusion in terms of terminology between degrowth and decoupling. Here, we're not talking about degrowth. We're talking about how can we create prosperity in a way that aligns with the climate ambition. We should have to avoid potentially catastrophic, climate events happening too often.
So there's a figure that I like to share, which is in the next slide. There would be enough clothes on Earth to dress properly with new clothes 9 generations of human being if we stopped producing clothes today. Okay? So when we look at what we just said and we get this figure, we must interrogate ourselves. Wouldn't there be other ways for companies within every field, manufacturing, designing manufacturing and selling goods, to make money and profits and without continuing to overproduce and increase the impact? So moving on, the question is, how do we achieve growth without selling more? Decoupling means keeping the growth factor without or with less new production of new goods. And so how can we do that? And that's what we explored in this white paper. I mentioned it. He worked on these topics for years. He's been working on these topics for years. He basically created, let's say it, the Circular Fashion Initiative for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And so let's explore how we can protect businesses, margins, and jobs, and changing the business model. So Francois, you want to introduce this schema?
Absolutely, and I think here there's two key aspects to the opportunities that we saw. The first one is circulating products. As Pierre-Nicolas said, there's already a ton of products in the economy. What if we were to make the most of them? And in a way, intuitively, it makes sense. We were to make the most of them. And so the two parts of this pyramid is first around product circulation, which is where we see it's still emerging, but the highest maturity and the most exploration happening. That is around, repair, resale, remanufacture. So how can you make sure that once a product is on the market, it can stay on the market and you can stay in use. You can repair it to keep it, good. You can resell it so that if you don't have a use for it, the next person will, or you can remanufacture it so that you keep most of the embedded energy, the engineering, the intelligence that's in the product, but basically look at component level and readjust the components to ensure that this product stays relevant and desirable. So that's the bottom part of the pyramid. And then the top part of the pyramid is where we see the highest potential for exploration, where we see some starting to go. We've seen it with companies like Fnac Darty, for example, setting very clear targets, the growth of services in their business over the next few years. And here we've sort of separated it in a way that helps exploration. So initially, you can create services that sort of add value to product circulation. If I have, let's say, a servicing contract or a warranty, then I have more confidence that I can keep this product for a long time. And I have more confidence that this product can be effectively repaired, etc. So that's sort of like the bottom of the pyramid. It really supports the circulation. Then on top of it, you can, in a way, find strategies to keep on adding value to your customer over time. So if you say, okay, Apple is very good at this, right? Like they keep on providing you with upgrades, they keep on, providing you with additional content. So when you buy an iPhone, it's not going to be out of date within 6 months. You can keep having new things and new experiences and new content on it for years to come. So that's how you can sort of maintain the perceived value. And if we think about, clothing, like Pierre-Nicolas mentioned before, what if you were to offer a styling service to people so that it's easier to navigate your wardrobe, to find, new combinations with what you already have, so that you can feel that the way you dress is novel without having to add any pieces or, add many pieces to your wardrobe. And then the last step is where it's the most sort of emerging at the moment. It's where it's probably the more niche based on, the typology of customer who use it, but it's complete dematerialization. It's getting completely rid of the product to only offer a service or an experience. And you can see it with, digital twin or virtual goods, or, how can you foster a community around your brand and activate it in meaningful ways. Pierre-Nicolas, do you have any maybe
Yeah.
you've worked on ideas?
No, what I would like to highlight is that the very bottom of this pyramid, which is, seems obvious, requires already so much implementation. How many brands can say that they offer a product circulation, product circulation options, a product circulation offering from repair to resell to remanufacturing with the proper incentives. There are not that many. There are not that many. The level of convenience, the share of value, the transparency of price, the possibility to verify product history, the possibility to access services in one click just in repair and resale is very uncommon on the market. Remanufacturing as well, how do we create an industrial approach? How do we create a recrafting approach? The dematerialization, we've seen this. I'll go back to that just after, because I think it's really important not to be overwhelmed by this pyramid and to start thinking from the bottom. What are the options that we can offer to people to allow them to enlarge the lifespan of their product, to repair them easily, to resell them when they don't want to use them, to bring them back in for remanufacturing. And then from there, you can start building on services. I'll go back to the example of Fnac Darty, which is the Best Buy for Europe, mainly French, but leading European distributor of white goods, small and big ones. They've clearly set a target to sell less new products. They did not sell a target to decrease their revenues. They're a publicly traded company. They want to continue to increase their revenues, their margins, their profits, their hires, but they're switching progressively from a buy always more to a use better strategy. A use better strategy that comes with fees to get unlimited repair, not only on the goods that you've purchased at Darty, but all the white goods you own can be covered by this service. So you're going to pay $12.99 starting per month, and all your goods are covered, and someone is going to come and repair whatever has to be. And then you see they have a Second Life service. We just launched with them the sale of all the appliances that were in the athlete village during the Olympics. They all come with a passport. We can come back to that. So it's just, sometimes when your DNA is to design, create, and sell new goods, it's very hard to be, okay, thinking about our product circulation. It's not my business. Some other people have to do it. But we all have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to reduce the impact of our activities without destroying the economy. And so repair and resell are not someone else's problem. They are every brand's problem. Some brands are like, oh, I don't believe in resell. I don't think it's compatible with the culture. Some other people have to do it. But it's not a question of culture. It's a question now of responsibility. We often focus on, when we talk with brands producing goods, they often say, oh, but look, we made a study and we know that 80% of the impact is in the materials. So we're going to try to do it with good materials. But I rarely heard, so we're going to stop using materials, or we're just going to use less materials. And for that, think about it, like this repair contract. Why can't I have that with, a department store? Why can't I have that with a fashion brand? Why can't I resell very easily everything that I buy within the brand's environment?
Wanted to just ask you really quick there, Nicolas, because I know obviously you do have quite a lot of brands that you are working with to implement some of these Arianee protocol into as well. What really are the incentives? I know in the paper you also talk about levers of change. Are there certain verticals or certain product categories that are a little bit more open to integrating this? I know you mentioned white goods, but let's say we're talking about the clothing, garments, or even the luxury.
The incentive is to be able to remain on this planet and still live on it. I think this should be enough of a big incentive. And the incentive is trying to do that while continuing to grow the economic performance. So it's a win-win. It's either
Why
we continue to do
not moving the needle fast enough?
So one of the
because it's a question of responsibility of leaders. That's why we're trying to push this message, because the incentive is obviously there's the regulation, and we're going to talk about it. Regulators are going to say you're going to do this, you're going to do that, but at some point we need to see the emergence of a new generation of leaders who are going to put forward the idea of transforming business models where it's not so easy.
I totally agree with you. And I think there's also a point where we can see today that if as a business, you're not entering those markets or you're sort of reticent to explore them, someone else will. And someone will come between you and your customer and take the intimacy away from you, take the community away from you, and basically shift you sort of further away from your customers. While if you engage in all those like new models, whether it's on product circulation or value-added services, and you develop them yourselves, you can maintain that control. And what we start seeing is companies that today, OEMs, like original equipment manufacturers, and that don't necessarily have a direct intimacy with customers because they work through a distribution network in order to sell their products, are trying to use technologies like the one from Arianee in order to create that direct connection with the first, second, third, and maybe more customer, because they realize that this is a huge source of business value for them. So I think there's like that really like clear opportunity to, in a way, not lose and not be relegated, further out from your customers and the understanding of them.
Yeah, and I really don't want to make that. This is you want to save the world, use Arianee. It's not the case. We are just like a very, very small part of the solution. But your question, Ashumi, is really interesting, because today what we see people that are not ready for change. And when I talk about people, I'm going to give you an example. I'm not going to mention the brand. I was on the website of a fashion brand who is known for being at the forefront of sustainable fashion. They present themselves as that. They help B Corp, etc. They implemented a transparency module allowing users to discover what's the story and the impact of their product. When you look at I looked at the first product. It was a dress that had made 35,000 kilometers before reaching, the warehouse, that has traveled in I don't know how many countries, and had a CO2 impact that was just like crazy. Can we really imagine that people are going to continue to buy that? Can we really imagine that we can continue to produce more goods this way? Probably not. And today we have people, like consumers, even when they see this information, continue to buy. We have brands who are focused on their revenues, their margins, and who don't want to challenge the status quo. And then we have a regulator who is starting to say, okay, you guys don't want to change by yourself, we're going to force it. We're going to see ESPR in Europe coming up. We're going to talk about it. And so the incentive will be regulation, but I think, Ashumi, and that's the point of the future and what we're trying to do here, we have to inspire new generations of leaders, new brand CEO and designers who will say, we are going to lead the way towards something new. And that was the mission of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who did a tremendous job, obviously, and still the mission. But can we just say more than, yeah, it's interesting, it's great, we're working on it, we're looking at our materials, we'll just put a recycled lace on the shoe. This is not enough. Not enough. So
I think then that the pyramid that you shared earlier, that businesses should have to look at a combination of all three instead of
completely
completely separate, right? Because and
I think what is really important is that as Pierre-Nicolas and you highlighted, Ashumi, like the mindset is really critical. When you think about those models, it's very emerging. The infrastructure is new. Everything requires a degree of exploration and investment that will impact short-term profitability compared to the existing model. That doesn't mean that it's true over the long term, but what it means is if you don't start exploring early enough, you're sort of creating that distance, between you and success that's going to cost you a lot more if you try to catch up later. So I think it's really important to see this also as a journey, as an sort of exploration and an investment into the future of the company. And as a sort of laboratory to also explore what your relationship with your customer could look like 5, 10, 20 years into the future.
This is critical because I don't want to turn this into a finger pointing. You're not doing anything. You're putting profits. All of this is complicated. The technological infrastructure, we're going to talk about it, is not there. The business models are not fine-tuned. Users are not ready for it. If you can buy a dress that has made 42,000 kilometers to a B Corp company, I mean, look, seriously, this is all of this is the beginning. But this is why we need people to stand up and decide to make changes. But let's move on to what can be missing, because at some point when you want to enlarge the life of products, you're gonna be facing open ecosystems, open spaces. When I buy something somewhere, then it's mine. I can decide to repair it wherever I want. I can decide to resell it wherever I want. And even though I would prefer enjoying the integrated services from the brand or the retailer who sold me this product, that would allow me in a one-click operation to access the service, most likely, I'm going to rely on what I'm used to do. And so we need data about products, a data that is persistent. What does that mean? A data that can be accessible all the time, that does not depend a startup or even the brand, because the brand can change and etc. And we need digital continuity. We need to be able to access this information. So these are two prerequisites that are going to be needed if we want to be able to foster these post-purchase services and business models. We're going to need this data. And so moving on, thank you.
To kind of clarify there, the data persistence point is about data sovereignty, correct? Which means that the data belongs and stays with the customer themselves.
I would say that at first, we would need an infrastructure that allows this data to remain accessible and does not depend on the life, death, or whatever of a startup. And that does not depend the possibility that a brand could disappear or that a brand could make different decisions about their choices. And so that's why, we're going to talk about it. The point of view of the regulator is that we need this missing piece. We need a piece of data that is identifying every single durable, sustainable good sold in the EU, to give access to this information when the product is created, to update this information when the product evolves. And the notion of persistence means we need the guarantee that I'm going to be able to access this data in 50 years, in 40 years, in 30 years. We're talking about durable goods that are not supposed to be, throwable. So if we move on to that, the regulator is starting to address this. And the name of the regulation, it's ESPR. So it's the idea of it's eco design for sustainable goods. Okay, so the goal of the regulator is to push brands to produce better and to create product that last longer and to make it possible for users to activate the options to make them last longer. What that means is by 2030, every sustainable good in Europe will have to have a data controller, a QR code or an NFC chip compatible with any smartphone that will give access to the product data at the SKU or item level. And that will need to be guaranteed for the entire lifespan of the product. And so when I talk about data persistence, we talk about this accessibility for the entire lifespan of the product. And when we talk about digital continuity, we talk about the connection between the data controller and the object. So,
and are we starting with the regulation correct me if I'm wrong, it's starting just with textile-based products?
So the category number one targeted textile with batteries and furnitures. And then progressively that will expand to any durable good sold in the EU.
Right.
So now what we'd like to explore, and that's where we go from, the more theoretical large-scale approach, and your request, Ashumi, was really that we could show how the kind of products we develop can contribute to make this change possible. So digital product passports can be very basic. It can be just a page that accesses a centralized database displaying the content of a product. We take another approach at Arianee, and we use public blockchains to enable this. And just would like to show you and explain why we believe that this infrastructure based on public blockchain, which we call tokenization, can accelerate this transformation. So if we move to the next slide, the game changer comes from the fact that the digital passport will be stored and will be built on a blockchain, which is a natively interoperable and open infrastructure, where we can store data in a persistent way, where we can make people collaborate in open ecosystems in a completely new way that never happened before, where basically you can differentiate the access to read, to update the information, and allow users to take control of the data in completely new ways. So moving on to the next slide, when you use a public blockchain, you unlock two new levels of possible features on a digital product passport. Obviously, the first feature, the read feature, which is the possibility when you scan a QR code to go on a page and read relevant. What we add with a public blockchain is the second level, which we call write, is the possibility for stakeholders within the ecosystem to come and update and timestamp the passport with an element of an event of the history of the product. Name it a repair, the end of a rental, the beginning or end of a warranty, the change of a piece, eventually a change of ownership, obviously. And so adding this element of rights comes with a lot of challenges, because if any brand or any producer of goods, any OEM wants to allow third parties to come and update their own centralized database, it's a nightmare to manage. You got to give API rights to people. You got to manage security. The centralized database are not made for that. So when you work with something centralized and you put it at home, it's very hard to manage these accesses. When you put it completely in the hands of a startup, basically, who's going to host that for you, then you become dependent to a risk of reversibility, of non-persistence, and in the end, the complexity, even though it's moved to the third party, remains to manage multiple access. When you work with an open infrastructure that is made for collaboration and that is natively decentralized, it's the basic feature to allow people to access the data with the good level of rights and to be able to contribute to it. And then lastly, the possibility to own the data. So, for the people at Future Plus, you've been at the forefront of what we thought would be the immediate Web3 revolution, where people would own their data in their wallets, concentrate the elements of their digital identity within a public address that they would control, with a key that they would control, and that would become the basic of the way we would operate online. Well, it happens that it's not going to happen right away. So the possibility to own data can be extremely relevant. For example, all the watch brands we work with, they all activate that. They all give a public key, private key to their users within their client list. But still, they use this ability to give them the control of their data. But for example, when we work with appliance brands, they just activate the read and the write to be able to work within their open ecosystem, but not necessarily to activate the transfer of data. So moving on to what's next, really the three advantages of building a digital passport on an a tokenized digital product passport on a public blockchain is on these three elements. The openness made by the open standards, all the open source that guarantees that there's no lock-in, reversibility is guaranteed, no one owns the code. The interoperability, which makes it possible to collaborate with stakeholders, have people update the data without risking neither to give access to your information system to many people or to depend on a centralized external player. And then the persistence of the data that offers the guarantee to have access to the content moving forward. Moving on, and I think we're almost done, this is an example of how an open, interoperable, and persistent product ecosystem could emerge around, for example, this Mugler bag, where you could have insurance services like Grace, second-hand marketplaces like Vestiaire, eBay, distributors like the Galerie Lafayette, repair services like Tilly or Serve Your Wardrobe, the eco-organism, which is organizing the reuse and recycling in the fashion industry, which is called Refashion in France, and all the regulators here we see, the French one, who are going to request from brands proofs that they enlarge the life of their product, that they implement reuse and recycling policies, and that are going to have an impact at the end on the eco contributions and all the taxes, the eco taxes that are going to be paid by brands and that you want to avoid by having a virtuous operation. So having a data that is designed for this open world, the same way that your goods are designed for the open world because you've bought them, you do whatever you want with them. In a way, I bought this Mugler bag. I can go wherever I want with it. I can sell it to whoever I want. I can repair it wherever I want. Well, the data should have the same capabilities, and that's what we're trying to achieve. And I think I'm pretty much done here. Yeah, we can pass that and maybe go with some questions at the end. I think because that's a lot of time. So. Yeah, anything you'd like to add, maybe?
No. I think that covers it all. I think Pierre-Nicolas. But yeah, I think that sort of ability of the technology to align the incentives for the actors across the spectrum between regulators, OEMs, retailers, customers, and different generation of customers is really important, and it really supports that sort of acceleration of decoupling for companies.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, actually, Francois. The alignment of having everyone sort of work together in a much more collaborative way, which is going to be really important to accelerate the pace of adoption as well.
Completely. And when we were looking at the in the paper, but also through the work that Arianee is doing, looking at the benefits, for different actors, it was just really staggering how it was very good at creating that alignment.
Great. So I think we're coming to the end of the webinar. Please do scan the QR code on the screen to download the position paper so you can read it. There's a lot of incredible information, a lot more in depth as well, in addition to what Pierre-Nicolas shared for his presentation. And now we just want to open up to questions. So if anyone who has joined wants to put questions into the live stream, then we will answer your questions. So just while we kind of wait for some questions to come in, maybe if there's is there anything that's coming up next that you would like to sort of touch upon, anything to sort of expect, not just in terms of obviously regulation that we're sort of moving quite close to, but what is the sentiment, not just from the brands, but also really how do you think this is going to affect customers? Like, do you think like people are asking the brands or putting pressure on the brands to have this information?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they, I go back to the example of the 42,000 kilometer dress, that's probably going to be a bestseller. Not only people are not asking, but when you give them the information, they don't care. They still buy the dress that has done, I don't know how many times around the world, which is like completely insane. And also, when we talk about digital passports, we often like, oh, do people scan? Do people? No, they do not. Basically, the level of information has to be much, much, much simpler, like the eco score, the planet score, the nutri score. We're gonna have to make this like one color, one letter. It's A, B, C, D, done. That's for the choice. But then what matters, the truth about a product that is new is the truth about the impact of its manufacturing and the travels to bring it here. This has to be simplified into something that customers can rely to, that is very easy. But then the truth about what happens next is the truth about how this product has been taken care of. How many hands has it been in? Has it been properly repaired? This truth is a different one. It's a truth that people will look into, because when you buy something secondhand, or when you go for something that had a first life, then you care about very different questions. So I think the willingness of people to learn about new things and used things is really different.
And in terms of convenience, you can imagine a world where you provide a lot of information about this is where you can repair it, this is how you can reset. You can provide a lot more convenience and allow people to do what they want with the product in a way that's much more streamlined, rather than having them, search online or ask friends for, recommendation. You can embed that directly into their product.
But the thing is, I think the regulator, we have to be very careful, even with the regulation. I heard the story of a brand very recently, French clothing, kids. And so to comply with the AJAC law, they basically, instead of adding the information for each and every product, they put a link in the footer of the website where you can access a duplication of the website that just talks about the impact of products. And that's a place where no one will ever go. That's completely separated from the shopping experience. But it complies with the law, because you have online accessible for each reference piece of content. And so, obviously, this is the question of who is going to move first. Is it the customer? Is it the regulator? Is it the brand? Obviously, it's going to be the regulator, and the brands are going to try to pass around. But we need change makers. We need people to show the way.
Excellent. I think that's a great note to wrap on. And, this has been super informative. Thank you, everyone, for joining.